Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jim Lee from Team Korea, IYPT 2018. It is a great honor to give the presentation at the finals, especially because this is the first time I have the privilege to speak throughout the whole competition. So the problem statement is as the following. An oiled horizontal cylindrical shaft rotates around its axis of constant speed. Make a ring from a cardboard disc with the inner diameter roughly twice the size of the shaft and put the ring on the shaft. Depending on the tilt of the ring, it can travel along the shaft in either direction. Investigate the phenomenon. So this is a video of phenomenon, and it's not working. So I'm going to define the problem that I'm going to investigate as the 3 parts. So since the length of the shaft is finite, there will be a certain time period when the ring and the shaft collides, and I am going to look at the time before the ring and the shaft collides. Also, I'm going to look at the oscillatory behavior of the ring that I would have liked to show you. And also I'm going to look at the amplitude and the frequency of the oscillation over time. The following diagram is a diagram where the amplitude and the time periods between the oscillations increase. So there are some thickness constraints for the ring. If the thickness of the ring is very, very thick, that means that the torque exerting on the tilt of the ring will not be enough. And we have the following values there. If the thickness of the ring is thick compared to the radius of the ring, then that means that the torque will not be enough for the ring to move. And as you can see, in very thick rings, you can see that the oscillatory behavior is not well observed. And because of this, we are not going to talk about these cases. We are going to think about ideal rings where the thickness is very, very small. So, going on to set some coordinate settings, because we have to investigate the motion of 3D vectors in 3 dimensions. I have to warn you that this will be a very complicated, there will be very complicated settings. So I'm going to define the normal vector n as the normal vector of the ring, and the vector r as the vector from the center of mass to the contact points, and small omega and large omega are the angular velocities of the ring and the shaft respectively. The XYZ axis is depicted in the picture, and we are going to define the 2 angles theta and phi as the following. On the right top corner you can see like a visualization of what the phi and theta values are. And according to my definitions, you can express the normal vector in terms of theta and phi. So, some more coordinate settings. Because the ring and the shaft will not meet completely on the x-axis, there will be an angle between the x-axis and the normal vector at point P. I'm going to define t hat as the tangential unit vector at point P. And if we define the angle, and from the angles that we defined, we can find the r vector. This is just like a view from the z-axis, and the ring should be tilted, so there should obviously be a z directional vector and the r vector. So this is all mathematics. I'm going to go on to some physics. There are 2 phases of the motion. So if we just put the ring on the shaft, it starts to slip and changes to non-slip motion because of friction. And in slipping motion, the energy is transferred from the shaft to the ring, and it is very hard to predict the motion of the ring. However, when the slipping motion ends and it starts to be in rolling motion, the energy is transferred so that the motion does not change. This is a very important part. The energy is given so that there is non-slip motion, and this is a very predictable motion. This is where the importance of oil comes in, because if the relative velocity between the ring and the shaft becomes larger, then there is this constraint between the ring and the shaft, and it helps the ring and the shaft be like in rolling motion. So the velocity constraints are as the following. Since the relative velocity at the contact point should be 0, just like looking at the motion from the ring's view, we have the velocity at the center of mass and the velocity and the rotational velocity of the ring when we look at the center of mass, and also that should be equal to the velocity of the contact point at the contact point when we look at it from the shaft view. And t is the tangential vector that I had mentioned earlier. And so we could draw a triangle of the velocity vectors as in the following diagram. So this is an experiment done to show that the ring and the shaft is in non-slip motion. I divided the the speed, the contact point velocity in the ring two divided by the angular velocity of the shaft. You can see that it is constant, and the constant should be r0, the radius of the shaft, and thus the non-set motion is proven because we've just proven that. Because we've proven this equation. So going on to some quantitative analysis, we could calculate the velocity at the center of mass of the ring by using the non-set motion velocity constraints we got earlier. We know the tangential vector, we know the n vector, we know the r vector, and just calculating it gets the following equation. If we denote that large chunk terms as v omega, then we get z directional motion there, and this is the z directional velocity of the ring. So, because like there are many forces in like directions that we don't know acting on the contact points, it is very hard to make an equation of motion. However, we know that the force acting in the z direction will act to accelerate the ring. We don't know what kind of forces will be there. We know that there will be driving force, friction, drag force. There will be like infinitely many forces on there, but we know that they will amount up to the mass of the ring times the acceleration of the ring in the z direction, and thus we get torque equations. And so these are the key equations we have so far. They are differential equations. It is very hard to solve them in like theoretical manner. But if we just like solve these simultaneous equations, we get three equations of three angles, phi, theta, and psi. So we're going to solve these equations numerically by using the Euler method. This is a flowchart of the Euler method. We have the initial conditions, and by solving the equations, we have the derivative of the three angles. Using iteration, we could get what the angles will look like after a single time step. And if we like do this over and over again, we get the three angles as a function of time. From this, we can calculate the displacement of the ring over time. So these are the simulation results. You could see that the angles have attenuation over time, and that and if we draw a phase diagram between theta and pi, you can see that there is an approximate like phase difference of phi divided by 2. But well, I'm going to talk about that later. And the simulation results for the center of mass of the ring in the z direction is as the following. You can see that there is a monotonous increase in both the amplitude and the time period of the oscillation. So this is just like visualization to show you how the motion looks like. I changed the parameters of the simulations, and you can see when I change the inner radius of the ring, the amplitude and the time periods increase as the inner radius increases. And the same physics hold for the outer radius of the ring. And you can see that if the angular velocity of the shaft is increased, you could also see the increase in the amplitude and the time period between the oscillations. So going on to my experiments. So the apparatus is as the following. I used a wood lathe with a shaft and a holder to minimize the oscillations in the x direction, xy directions of the shaft, and I could control the angular velocity of the wood lathe by using that button, and I could read the angular velocity. I used WD-40 oil for the oil of the ring, and I used the level to prove that the axis is completely parallel. The x-axis is completely parallel to the direction of gravity. And I also analyzed the three angles by simultaneously taking videos from three directions, and analyzing these videos over time, we could get the angles over time. So these are the apparatus I used. I used cardboard discs with sizes of washers. The numbers behind the M are the diameter of the inner diameter of the ring. And I used a thickness of 1 millimeter of the ring so that the thickness would be neglected. So, and I also made some corrections for the distortion of the camera. Since the camera only reads the angle and not the actual displacement of the ring, I used these following methods to make sure that the ring, that I have the actual displacement of the ring, not the angle. So using these correction methods, I could calculate the center of mass. I could experimentally observe the change of the center of mass of the ring, which is depicted in the black line. And And you can see that, and the red lines are my simulations. I could get the initial conditions by the 3 angles that I have observed, and plugging in the specs of the ring, I could get the following simulations that are in red. And you can see that there is a very close correlation between my simulations and my theory, and my experiment. So, when I change the spec of the ring and like plug those values in, you can see that there is still a close correlation. But I wanted to do more than just predict the motion of the ring. I wanted to show you that I can make some linear relationships and help you understand this better. So as I have said before, the velocity of the ring I can express the velocity of the ring by a function of the angles, and if I make some complicated calculations, I could express the velocity of the ring of time-independent state property function of 3 angles and the angular velocity of the shaft. So this is the experimental results I got for the function and the velocity of the ring. So when I change the angular velocity of the shaft, you can see that the slope sharply increases in it increases according to that equation on the right top side. This was done for a single washer. And you can see that even when I change the washer, and if the angular velocity of the shaft is a constant, you can see that it is on the same line. So to conclude, based on observations, I could see that the ring of the shaft was in non-set motion, and by using the velocity constraints from the non-set motion and some torque equations, I could suggest a quantitative model for the movement of the ring, and they were very fitting with my...
Thank you very much. This is a report from the team from Korea, and now we have questions from the opposing team from China. Please, could you be sure to use your microphone?
Yes, I'm ready. Okay, so thank you for a wonderful report. I would like to ask a few questions. So the first question is, you have defined your geometric coordinate. So how many degrees of freedom are there in your system?
There are 3 degrees of freedom.
Okay, thank you. And for another question, what do you think to be the role of the oil in the system?
I think I've explained that it provides viscous constraints so that it is in non-set motion, and also before it is in non-set motion, it also helps.
Okay, so what kind of friction do you think that the oil may support?
Obviously, because it's non-set motion, static friction.
Okay, so another question. You have mentioned your slipping, just the difference between the slipping motion and non-slip motion. So can you show me a video between these 2 motions?
I don't think my videos are working, but like after some time there would be a non-slip motion, and I analyzed only the non-slip motion.
Can you turn to your slide where you mentioned non-slip motion, slipping and non-slip motion, please? Okay, so you can see that this spin motion there is hardly predictable. But however, in your equation, I see a lot of non-linearity in your equations. So do you believe that this hardly predictable is a result from chaotic movement?
No.
Okay, and for another question, can you please turn to page 31? Okay, I see from this that from M16 to M24, the inner radius is not the same, and it will not be roughly the twice of the diameter of the shaft. So do you think this is appropriate for your study?
The diameter of my shaft was about 1.2 centimeters, and I believe that I did it was problem statement.
Okay, for another question, in the problem review, you have said that the problem asks us to use a cardboard disc. So is this a cardboard disc or not?
This is a carbon.
Okay, thank you very much. Time for preparation of the opponent.
Yes, hello everyone, I'm Hansen from China. Today I'll demonstrate you my opposition report from problem number 6, the ring Euler. Now let's make a summary of the reporter's report. The reporters make a good qualitative attribution to the periodic movement, to friction, to the problem of friction, and I believe that friction is essential to this problem as the reporter has discussed. We already use a non-slip friction and Newton's second law on this, which can quantitatively measure and predict the movement of the disc, which I believe that this prediction can be, his prediction is sufficient to his experiment. And moreover, they have experimental verifications on the outer diameter, the initial rayleigh angle, and the angular velocity of shaft, which I believe that these parameters is essential to the movement of the disc, and I believe that these are important parameters. So now I'll make an evaluation of the reporters. So first, for his strength, I used the non-slip friction to model the periodic movement, which I believe that this non-slip, it is good to use a non-slip, but it can be further discussed. And moreover, they have used the electric motor to ensure the constant angular velocity, which you can see that this is very important for the phenomenon of this whole process. And moreover, they have used experiments to verify some parameters, including the inner outer diameter, the initial releasing angles. And furthermore, they have a clear understanding of the reciprocating motion, and I believe that this is the important part. However, there are some deficiencies regarding this report. For example, they have insufficiently addressed some physics mechanism. For example, the rigid body mechanism. They have known that in this system, the disc is not rotating in a fixed axis. But however, in their report, in their moment of inertia, they have used a scalar but not a tensor. So here I question the application of the use of the moment of inertia. And furthermore, they have not addressed the role of oil and friction. So if it causes sufficient viscosity, so I would like to question about the reporter. Does this mean that if the shaft is coarse enough, does it will have the similar effect when it's have the ring order? It just maintains the viscosity. So that this point I would like to further discuss. Furthermore, there's no theoretical explanations for the quick turn after release. We just see a theoretical and a simulation from the numeric solvation. But I don't believe there's qualitative analysis for this explanation. He also did not mention the increase of the amplitude judging criteria of two kinds of motion in a non-slip and fluid motion, and why Z is increasing continuously with the increased energy from the shaft, which I believe that this should be further qualitatively analyzed in our discussion. Moreover, we have inadequate experimental verification on the coefficient of friction. As we can previously discuss, that I believe that the non-slip motion, he has also mentioned slipping and non-slip motion, which I believe that in a non-slipping motion, this coefficient should be further discussed. The material of the disc has not been covered properly because in the problem review, they have told us to use a carbon disc, but rather not a carbon disc. So what is the difference between two kinds of discs, which I will further discuss? And the thickness of it, they have maintained it to be 1 millimeter. But how would the movement or the pattern of movement will change when you increase the thickness of the disc? It should be discussed. Furthermore, they have left investigation on the energy transmission between the shaft and the disc, which I believe is important to determine the movement of the disc. And moreover, they not use the carbon disc, as we previously mentioned in my question. Furthermore, the inner diameter is not quite the diameter of the shaft. So I will find a question of, in the problem review, it asks us this roughly twice. So what does the roughly twice exactly mean? I believe it's the increase of the diameter may have other effect or other phenomena to the whole problem, which is to be discussed. Now I to invite the reporter up for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
So first, you have you have seen that if the oil provides viscosity for its movement, so do you believe that so that if it provides velocity to maintain the pure rolling between the disc and the shaft, do you believe that an extremely coarse shaft will cause a similar effect of this process?
The friction between the ring and the shaft does not matter whatsoever as long as it is in non-slip motion. If we change the shaft to a shaft that has like a friction coefficient of infinity, that will do nothing but change the maximum angular velocity of which the ring and the shaft will be in non-slip motion.
So do you believe that if the shaft is coarse enough in the surface, it will cause the similar phenomena of your explanation?
Yes, because it is in non-slip motion.
Do you think that do you think what is the primary difference between the oil and the solid?
So there is no like large difference in my part of the theory, because if it is in non-slip motion, nothing matters. However, the oil is important before the non-slip motion begins. When you put the ring on the shaft, It is not non-slip motion to begin with.
Okay.
There is a difference.
Okay, I see. So, but for the first question will be that in the oil, there's liquid. So if there's liquid, it do not need to move in the same velocity as a rich body. So for example, if this moves at a faster velocity and this moves at a lower velocity at two separate boundaries, and therefore there will be a velocity gradient among its inner part. So do you believe that this have you considered this velocity gradient in your modeling of the friction?
I did not model friction because friction is only a factor that only helps the non-slip motion. I do not see the point in your. I do not see what is important about.
So you believe that in this scenario, the behavior of liquid, of the oil and the solid are the same?
Yes. So I've mentioned that in my when I used the Newton's second law for Fc equals mc mz 2 dots. That was just like all the forces acting will conclude to mz.
Okay, so I don't disagree. I don't agree with this proposal because I believe that the use of the oil is a liquid and therefore may have a greater effect since the oil can have a velocity distribution along the two boundaries. So I believe that this effect would cause a so-called lubrication friction, which measures the friction as the following equations. So I believe that the use of these equations will help us determine the friction force regarding to this problem.
I strongly disagree. I do not really care what these values are because those values, the net forces in the z direction will just be.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question because I believe that this is a central part of the whole problem. And next case, you have mentioned you use carbon but not cardboard discs. So what do you believe? So what do you think is the difference between these two parameters?
So when I use cardboard, I use laser cutters to carve the cardboard discs. But in those situations, it is very hard to make a smooth inner circle, and thus the cardboard disc kind of.
So what do you think this where it's not smooth? What do you think the result will cause?
Non-slip motion will not hold, but it would be virtually impossible to actually give a quantitative analysis in those situations where the ring starts to jump.
So I believe that this is important part since the cardboard disc can store oil inside and have another deformation around the side. So I believe that the use of the cardboard disc should not be replaced by the carbon disc. So do you agree with that?
Or what do you think would be the difference? Can I see your point?
There's deformation around carbon disc. The carbon disc is very hard. So carbon disc may not have an exact not have some of the features the carbon disc have. So I believe that this should be further investigated by using the carbon disc, but not majorly the carbon disc. Furthermore, you have mentioned there are three degrees of freedom in the system. So can you show me that why there's 3 degrees of freedom in the system?
I think I may have misphrased that. If you just think of the degree of freedom of the normal vector as just 1 degree of freedom, that's where.
Okay, but however, to my knowledge, basically that for a rigid body, there are 3 translational degrees of freedom and 3 rotational degrees of freedom. By the limiting of the shaft, this one must be subtracted out due to the constraint. So -1, and then it runs at 5. So I believe there's 5 degrees of freedom.
We have non-slip motion, and we have torque analysis.
Okay, but however, I can even mention your degrees of freedom according to presentations. You have phi, theta, and so on psi. Yes, exactly. However, there's 2 more degrees of freedom as you mentioned in the presentation. Alpha, which is the angle between the vertical and the contact point.
That is psi. That is psi.
Okay, so just the use of psi and the use of z, for example, is as it translates around.
But by non-slip motion, we could calculate z over.
Yes, but do you believe that the z is essential for the movement?
No.
Degrees of freedom.
No.
Okay, but I believe that as it moves along z and you calculate the function between the as the word of z and function of time, I believe that the degrees of freedom in z is essential to be inputted in the theoretical analysis, and I believe that it would be considered as a degree of freedom according to this theory.
I could calculate the velocity in the z direction by a function of these 3 functions.
Okay,
I do not see your point.
And one more degree of freedom has calculated. Self-rotation is one more degree of freedom which the rigid body would have. But there would be like the angle of self-rotation, which would be alpha, to be incorporated in the system. And I believe that the use of 5 degrees for freedom is more sufficient and more scientific than the use of only 3 degrees freedom to calculate the whole series.
I started with 5 degrees of freedom, and by using, I actually have omega there, and that would be similar to alpha. And just like,
yeah, it should be counted as 1 degree of freedom, but not by simply saying it is omega, or it's the angular velocity. So I believe that use of 5 degrees of freedom is essential to this problem, so I'd like to move on to our next point, which would be that what is the working mechanism by the rotation and the increase of amplitude? And it's the increase of amplitude. So can you verify, can you qualitatively analyze that?
qualitatively.
Qualitatively.
Okay, so you do agree that friction acts alongside the ring and the shaft? So
Yeah,
that
yes, the friction exerted on the disc.
yes, yes. So that would mean that the tilt of the disc would have attenuation over time.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. But it is very, very hard to find a qualitative like explanation for the relationships between the angles and the z like displacement of the ring, and I cannot find any explanation but for quantitative explanation.
For myself, I believe that the use of lubricating friction can help better understand the working mechanism, since the lubrication would cause velocity difference between the shaft and the disc, so that as the disc moves too slow, this friction would cause this rotation would cause the disc to accelerate along the z-axis, and therefore it will accelerate. As the velocity is greater, then it will decelerate due to the friction, which has a trend to the velocity of the shaft.
I believe it is not that simple.
But this is good qualitative analysis. And furthermore, you have to say that there's only one contact point of your rigid body and the beam. So, do you have ever considered the effect of thickness of this?
Well, I have said that I will only consider thin discs, and in thin discs, okay, so actually I cannot find, so like theoretically there should be 2 points, but because of the theta, because like the disc actually goes in this direction also, there is only 1 contact point, and even at 2 contact points, there will not be a very big difference because the moment arm of the 2 contact points will be very similar if the thickness of the disc is.
Okay, I see that. If the shaft if the disc has the same direction of shaft, then it's fine. It could be modeled as a simple rotation. However, if the disc has a rotation around its axis, for example, like this, there will be 2 contact points in these 2 scenarios.
Oh, but I'm talking. What I just said was that the angle theta makes the disc actually like levitate on one axis, and I've experimentally seen that there's only one contact.
Okay, so I believe that in this scenario, this will cause a significant difference in the gravitational potential, since if it's 2 contact points, it will lift up by some degrees, and therefore the gravitational potential may have a significant effect to the movement, which is caused by the double point contacts. So in this case, I believe that the thickness of the disc should not be negligible in his scenarios, like accounting for the movement of the disc. So do you believe it?
Oh, so like I actually calculated the angle. So like the angle psi, the angle that I defined as psi, that would be this angle right here. That would be important for double point contact. And when I calculated the angle that is needed for double point contact, it was much smaller than my experiment.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. That was a wonderful discussion, but the time is over.
Okay, thank you.
And 1 minute summary.
So, thank you. I first mentioned, so in order to the discussion, I first mentioned about some problems regarding the problem review. The essence of the problem. For example, what does the always mean? It should mean the lubrication friction, but not as the rotation. Constant rotation at the contact point, and therefore and moreover the problem states the carbon disc. So the carbon disc should be used as this phenomenon, not instead of the carbon disc. And moreover, he has lacked a basic understanding of the degrees of freedom in this scenario. As we calculated by equation on the left, we can see that just 5 degrees of freedom should be further implemented in his theory. And moreover, he does not mention qualitatively how the rotation and the movement of this starts to work, so that this working example should not be further used. And the effect of thickness of the disc, which is considerable in his videos, as about several millimeters should not be neglected. For a solid thickness and a double point, and the air resistance should not be involved. It should be calculated now due to the large surface area. So I believe that this should be calculated and involved.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. And questions from the team Singapore reviewer.
Thank you for the discussion. Firstly, to the opponent, do you believe that the coefficient of friction affects the ring's motion significantly?
Yes, because coefficient may have the important aspect of the lubrication friction.
Okay, thank you. So do you think the presence of oil will cause the ring to slip more easily?
Excuse me?
Do you expect the oil to cause the ring to slip more easily?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So to the reporter, can you estimate the thickness of the oil on your shaft?
No, and that is not needed.
So is it very thin? Is the
It's very,
okay.
Actually I use WD-40 and it is 17 micrometers.
Okay, so to the opponent, do you still believe that this velocity gradient that you mentioned is important and will it cause the slipping?
It will cause the velocity gradient, however, it's very difficult to measure.
Okay,
but
okay.
this is important to the whole movement of the disc.
Okay, thank you. So, to the opponent, do you also think that the main reason for a cardboard disc is due to the deformation effects?
The definition effect will not be a very important aspect, but however, in your quantitative analysis, the deformation will cause a transition between 1 point and 2 points contact, and may therefore affect the movement in this
Okay,
transition
thank
procedure.
you. So, to the reporter, do you think that the carbon ring versus your carbon ring, does this difference affect the ring's motion significantly in that case?
In my carbon risk, I could observe jumps, and I believe that those were not really mentioned in the public statement. The public statement does not want us to investigate those, so I made a smoother carbon ring.
So you are saying carbon ring will jump?
Because, that was due to technical difficulty.
Okay, thank you. So, do you, to the reporter again, do you consider the collisions of the ring when the ring tilts too much?
I cannot observe those situations.
Okay, so to the opponent, do you think this is important?
I believe collision is very important by regarding the deformation and the collisions between the rotation and the size. So this should be fully considered by either transition.
Okay, thank you. So once again to clarify, for the reporter, so your change in direction due to the ring's motion is not because of collision with the shaft?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So to the reporter, okay, do you account for the thickness of the ring in your final theoretical model?
No.
Okay, thank you. So also to the reporter, how did you release your ring at the start of experiment?
So the initial conditions are very, very hard to regulate. So I just measured it after some time so that it would be in oscillating motion. I did not regulate the initial.
Thank you. And did you account for air resistance in your model in any way?
The air resistance is actually included because that would just sum up the net force of all of those forces will sum up to and.
Okay, thank you. And to the opponent, do you think air resistance will affect the ring's motion in this case?
Yes, so the thing, because we know that the surface area of the ring is very large, so it definitely affect the movement of the ring.
Okay,
can I add on that?
Yes.
I believe that there will be a very, very small effect of air resistance because if there is angular velocity in the tilt of the ring in that direction, the air resistance in that direction would be smaller than the bottom direction. That would account.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Time is over, and we have time for preparation for the review.
Ready? Okay, very good morning to everyone. I'm Pai Xue from Team Singapore, and today I'll be reviewing problem number 6, ring oiler. So we begin by analyzing the report, which is moving on to some strengths. We can see that firstly the report has a very comprehensive quantitative modeling of the phenomenon used by modeling the Euler angles as well as using the torque and force equations to fully account for the Newton's second law and to model the ring's motion. And there was also a well-built experimental setup by using a leveler to ensure the horizontal of the shaft as well as an angular velocity reader. However, some areas of improvement includes first the complete no use of a cardboard disc, since the problem statement requires us to use a cardboard disc, and this may possibly lead to the reporter observing the wrong phenomenon, and I'll elaborate later. And there was also unsatisfactory discussion on the effects of oil, which I believe could have additional effects other than causing the ring to slip. There was also no characterization on the coefficient of friction, and I feel that this could have been done to clarify the doubts in the discussion about the slipping. And there was also no discussion into the collision of the ring on the shaft at the maximum, and I feel that because of the geometrical constraint, it between the shaft and the ring. When the ring tilts too much, we can actually see that the double contact will cause the ring to turn back, but this was however not mentioned in the report at all, and I feel that this should have been investigated. There was also an unsatisfactory qualitative explanation of why the direction of the translation depends on the tilt. And I believe that this is very important as it helps us understand the translational motion of the ring in the first place. And there was no discussion into the effects of inner radius of the ring, which I mentioned once again could be important in the geometrical constraint between the ring and the shaft. And lastly, there was a limited experimental scope which includes the investigation into the types of oil used, which I believe is important. So we will move on to analyze the opponent. Firstly, the opponent rightly pointed out the lack of a use of a cardboard disc, and I've already mentioned that this is important. And the opponent pointed out a lack of discussion in the function of oil, which I believe is also important since the oil and the cardboard disc together could lead to some adhesive effect between the oil, and this may change the ring's motion. There was also a qualitative explanation on the effects of inner diameter, and the opponent pointed out the wrong number of degrees of freedom, but the opponent missed out some important points, which includes the role of the air drag, which may be enhanced by the lightness of the ring, and there was also a collision which was missed out, and the trigger points include investigation of the energy. So moving on to the first discussion, which is on the function of the oil, I disagree with both the reporter and the opponent, since I believe that the coefficient of friction would actually increase with the use of oil due to adhesive effects between the ring and the shaft. And I feel that a very simple way to verify this would be to conduct an experimental characterization of the coefficient of friction using an inclined plane experiment with and without oil to see when the ring will start slipping. And moving on to the second discussion, which was on the use of a cardboard disc, I agree with the opponent that the cardboard disc should have been investigated, but however, the opponent states that the cardboard disc will deform, which I believe is not a very important point, and I feel that the most important point is that the cardboard will absorb the oil, which will result in adhesive effects changing the coefficient of friction, and this may affect the ring's motion further. And moving on to the third discussion point, the opponent mentioned that there are 5 degrees of freedom, but the reporter responded that there are 3 degrees of freedom, and in this case I agree with the opponent since that there is only one constraint of the system, and due to the 3 rotational freedoms and translational freedoms, there will be a resultant of 5 degrees of freedom. And lastly, on the effects of the thickness, I believe I partially agree with the reporter since the ring is only in contact with the shaft at one point, and the reporter could have conducted an experimental investigation to find out the limits to his theory, which can hold for different ring thicknesses by considering the geometrical constraint. And so lastly, I believe that the reporter gave an unsatisfactory qualitative discussion on the translational motion of the ring, and there was no direct answer to the problem regarding why the direct translation depends on the tilt. The opponent rightly pointed out that the reporter did not follow the problem statement and rightly pointed out the various theoretical flaws. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, you sit down because there are 2 minutes for the reporter.
So, thank you. I would like to summarize this debate mainly by 4 points. So, the first point was about the degree of freedom. I do not know why that is important. I started out with many different parameters, and I used geometric constraints and the torque equations to cut them down to 3, which are the 3 angles. And if I know the 3 angles, the initial value of the 3 angles, then I have successfully given a complete prediction for how the ring will move. Also, a very important point about friction. I believe that friction plays a role only to maintain the non-slip motion. It does not matter if there is more oil, if there is less oil, if there is no oil. It does not matter because as long as the non-slip conditions hold. So if there is more lubricated friction, there will be less static friction, and the sum of those forces will just act to make non-slip motion. I do not see what the opponent and the reviewer were making upon this point, and also I partially do agree with the point of the cardboard disc. I do not know why absorbing the oil will be important. As I've said before, the friction coefficient is not important, and due to technical difficulties, making a cardboard disc will make a jump alongside the motion of the disc, and I believe that is against the problem statement, and I've done my best to actually go with the problem statement. The last point was about double contact, and I actually did some experimental. I actually did some experiments to see when there is double contact. It was about 50 degrees, and in both my experiments and my theory, the angle of the tilt of the ring was very small compared to 50 degrees, it was actually close to 20 degrees. And I believe that collision alongside the two double contact point is not valid at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, okay, let's make it on the road. Alexander?
Okay. My question for reporter. Yes. Did you observe the changing of direction? If you did, can you explain?
Oh, so the changing of the direction is made by the changing of the tilt of the ring. I could show you, but I can't. So this is because of the non-slip motion of the ring. The direction of the velocity of the contact point should be 0 in the z direction, but the tilt of the ring makes the rotational velocity in plus z direction if the ring is tilted like this. Thus, the center of mass of the ring would move in the opposite direction. I think I've made that point clear.
Okay, thank you very much. Ilya?
Okay, to the reviewer, please. You insisted that only cardboard absorbs oil, and if we're not using cardboard, we're at risk of the possibility of observing the wrong phenomenon. Can you suggest what kind of wrong phenomenon can we observe here?
So I believe that one possible phenomenon could be, so we understand that there is a geometrical constraint between the ring and the shaft. So we will first expect that when the collision happens, the ring may turn around. But however, I believe that if there is oil in between the ring and the shaft, and if the oil is sufficiently viscous, there could be additional adhesive effects, and this can be further enhanced by the cardboard absorbing of oil, which will cause this collision to be damped out. So it is possible that the ring may actually just stick to the shaft and continue translating in one direction. So I believe this regime was not sufficient.
Okay, thank you very much. Mladen?
Yes, my question is to the reporter because it refers to a technical detail that may have something to do with your comparison with the theoretical results. You're using the M designations for the sizes of the rings, namely the inner diameters. But M22 doesn't mean exactly that the inner diameter is 22. It refers to a thread size 22, which basically is the mid size between the top and the bottom of the thread. And the inner size of the ring is supposed to fit that particular thread, which means slightly bigger than the maximal diameter.
So what is the question? Okay.
My question is, have you checked with the technical tables to see whether or measured with calipers to see whether your inner diameter is exactly the assumed according to the M technical specification?
22, like for M22, there were 22 millimeters with error range of 0.5 millimeters, and I believe that was...
Okay. Eric?
To the reporter, as already brought up by the opponent, the question about the tensor of moment inertia. In which reference frame were you? Was your tensor diagonal or not?
Yes.
Can you rephrase that question? I do not think I
Whether your moment of inertia was diagonal or not in the reference frame you worked?
It wasn't.
And did you account for it in your equations?
But I theoretically proved that the omega, the small omega, the actual rotation of the ring is very, very large compared to the phi dot or theta dot. So
okay.
I just if I could pass back.
All right, very quick one. I think let's try to be quick because we are running out of time.
Okay, for the opponent, please, can you explain why the inner diameter is roughly twice the diameter of the shaft has to be important for this problem?
Excuse me?
Why the factor of 2 in the problem statement?
Roughly twice the...
Yeah.
Yes, because the inner diameter of the heavily affects the collision between the disc and the band shaft, because if the inner diameter is too small, then a relatively small inclined angle can make a collision, and therefore they have a different phenomenon for this, different phenomenon for this.
Okay, thank you. Can you quickly show me the slide number 14? I think it's roughly 14. Yeah.
40 or
14.
40-ish.
1, 4.
This is 1, 4.
No, okay, so somewhere, yeah, there was a graph and there was this omega and constant. So maybe 13. Okay, so why? Okay, it's not really visible on the screen. Why is now omega both on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side of the comparison of the graph? So you have capital omega both left and right. Why? So what does it mean?
The large omega is what we controlled. As we can control the angular velocity of the shaft, and the angular velocity of the shaft is very constant.
No, okay. Once again, there is omega both on the y-axis and on the x-axis.
So, like, originally I wanted to show you like a linear regression between omega and that vector value, but I thought this would make my point clear.
Okay. Quick questions, John and Elia, and then we'll stop.
Quick question for reporter then. You seem very dismissive of the effects of friction. So can you tell me why the problem requires that the shaft is lubricated with oil?
So the effect of oil is that it helps the non-slip motion, and obviously friction is always considered inside non-slip motion, and the fact that it is non-slip motion means that friction is actually like taken into account. But the lubrication of the shaft will like help like the boundary will like make the limits of the angular velocity of the ring higher, because there is a very fast rotation, then it will slip. But it will be higher.
Okay, thank you. And last question, Elia.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you succeeded in that, but I would like a quick answer. Physics. Why the tilt control the direction of motion of the ring?
Okay, why the tilt does control physical answer, why the tilt controls the transversal motion of the ring. Okay.
So that would be non-slip motion. So this equation is like the governing equation of the motion of the ring. If the tilt, this is like from the above view. So if the ring is tilted in this direction, the velocity of the contact point in the shaft view would be in this direction, and the rotational velocity of the ring would be in this direction. However, it is non-slip motion, so the relative velocity should be zero, and thus the ring should move in the opposite direction. Plus.
Okay. Thank you very much. We exceeded a little bit of time, but like you haven't seen it, but at the one moment, almost all the jurors raised their hands, so there is no way for me to select which jurors should be given the right to give the questions and which not. But I think now we are over, so thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you.
And the jurors are working hard. Kent is ready already. Kent is very efficient. Yeah, that's the winner for today. And Elia is as well. So wow, we're quick. So
I think I needed to stay consistent with my marks for the day. And as I gave the report before 6, so this was something to be comparable with. I think mainly the problems were picked up by opposition and review. I agree that the oil influence should have been investigated, the inner diameter, the cardboard. So these were the marks that lowered my decision. So I think the partial grading is 2 for the presentation and 1.5 for the discussion with the opponent. So that was rounded to 4 in the end.
okay, thank you very much. And on the other hand, we had 2 7s there. I think Mladen, maybe. Short comment.
I expected a little more from this presentation. Nevertheless, I'm pretty well satisfied with what was shown. I understand that the reporter was playing it safe and basically delivering a little less than maybe they could have done with comparison with the etc. My partial grades are 3.8, 2.7, minus 0.4. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And you can pass the mic to Ilya, who had a 6 for the opponent, which was the single lowest grade.
Okay. As for the opposition, I felt that you were asking a lot of relevant questions and criticizing the report. But at the same time, I felt that the report itself had a lot of points that were obvious for criticisms. And you could discuss more, and also you could prioritize more with highlighting the aspects of the report that are, let's say, that deserve analysis and deserve your critical opinion. And in this sense, I felt that you could have done a little bit better in this sense. So my partial grades are +1 for questions, +2 for the presentation itself, for your statement, and +2 for the discussion. I felt that your opposition was good, but in my opinion, you could have done a little bit better.
Okay, thank you very much. And Kent on the other side, number 8.
Yes. So I thought you had a lot of very important topics in that discussion. I gave you 1.5 for the questions asked, plus 2.5 for the speech. We did a good job of summarising what was going to be coming up, and 3 for the discussion report. I thought you led that really well and covered the topics very well, and 0 for the questions.
Okay, and Elia wants to add something?
I gave an 8 is an approximation of 7.5. What I basically like is you attempted to give a physical explanation of the mechanism, and I value that a lot. So that's why I created to it.
Okay, thank you. And then for the grades for the reviewer, there were 2 7s. Yeah, Ilya was already explaining, so I can add my points. Yeah, actually I had 7.5, so I would have to decide. And yeah, my partial grades were 1.5, 2.5, and 2.5. And finally, I decided to go down because the last question you had, the last answer you gave with the sticking of the cardboard, this is something I don't really agree. I've seen your presentation. I know it's like your solution there. It's fine, but I'm not on that side. And basically, I think yeah, it was certainly a reasonable review. What I was not that much satisfied with were the questions, because especially at the beginning, you really faced mostly towards the opponent, and I think there was so much to ask on the reporter side. I would pretty much more appreciate like focusing on going down to the reporter side, but to praise, I think like the matter of 2 points of contact. This is a crucial thing here, and this is something which I, on the other side, appreciated that you brought it in very clearly, and also that you supported the number of degrees of freedom that were pointed out by the reporter. But we had a couple of 9s, so I don't know who was not speaking that much. John. Here, yeah.
This is very easy for me to answer because in the previous stage you said I had left no room for improvement. I proved my point because I considered this to be very much on a par with the previous review, so I gave it the same score.
Yeah, okay, that's a clear...
That's the vision?
Yeah, certainly. For me, I think for them, for everyone. So, yeah, thank you very much for everyone. Let's have a big applause again. And let's make a 10 minutes break. After the 10 minutes, we start preparation time. So if the audience needs 1 or 2 minutes more, that's fine. But basically, we start in 10 minutes. Thank you.